And fawning is a new one to me, which I find amusing because I'm a big fawner. I didn't
Yeah,
realize
yeah,
how much I was doing it. Well, because you're in survival mode so much, right? And it's just easier to say once in a while, yeah, whatever, just go do that because I just don't have the energy anymore to, I think a lot about how my kids fight in a teenager, they snap at you. It's very apparent what's going on there. Or flight, they're in their room with their door shut for 24 hours with their phone. That's pretty. And I haven't had a lot of experience with fawning with my kids. They tend to be fighters or flighters.
Mhm.
But I've heard from other parents, you ask your kid a simple question like, "Did you take the trash out?" And they just say yes, even though they haven't done it and they know they're going to be busted because it's just easier. Which,
Right.
people are like, "Why am my kid lying to me?" Well, it's part of that fawning. But I've
Yeah,
also
it's not like I'm not
recognized,
going to find out that the trash didn't. I mean,
I know you
it's
are.
going to
You're
be
just like,
found out,
do
right?
you
But
think I'm dumb? Come on, I'm gonna
yeah,
recognize this at some point. But I get it. In the moment, they're just like, whatever. I just can't cope with another thing. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just gonna say yes. So you go away.
very moment, it's survival. It's that idea of avoiding the immediate punishment or consequence of saying that you didn't do the thing that you know you were supposed to do. So there's like a survival mechanism in there to avoid the immediate conflict. Although, of course, we know as parents that just erodes the trust and makes things more difficult in the long run.
Right.
But
Although I will say,
um,
I have a friend who has an ADHD son and daughter. And for whatever reason, her daughter was one of those kids that just told a lot of little white lies all the time. And it
yeah,
drove her crazy until she started to understand she's not lying to you because she's trying to deceive you. She's lying to you because she's overwhelmed. And it makes
right.
it a little bit easier to deal with.
Right. Or she's concerned about the relationship at some level in that
Right.
moment, right? Doesn't want to disappoint her parents or get in trouble
Right.
or, yeah. And again, it could be more even about disappointing the parents. And so it's tough because as a parent, if you don't know that this is happening, you could misattribute the cause of the lie, right? Like that they're just being deceitful or disrespectful or something on those lines, but really it may be a sign that they're trying to preserve the relationship or they're fearful for the connection or their attachment may be at
Well,
risk.
and that's where the understanding of this becomes so helpful because what happened to her was every time her daughter did this, where do you think she went? To the fight mode. Just made her
Right.
mad,
Yeah,
right?
it
And then
triggered
it
her
was
into
it
her,
was just this endless cycle. But once you understand why they're acting the way they are and why it's triggering the reaction in you, you can't control it all the time, but the more awareness you have, the easier and the better you are able to handle it.
right.
At least that's what
Yeah,
I've found.
yeah, and this is probably the real key takeaway that I want parents to think about in this case, because you can't really control your son or daughter's reactions directly, right? I mean, I think you can inflame them by provoking them either intentionally or unintentionally, right? Or you
Been
can do
there,
things that
done
will
that
make it
many
worse, right?
times.
And again, with neurodivergent kids, that can be a hair trigger. It can be almost anything that can set them off, or things you don't even know are going to set them off will set them off. But you can control, I mean, over time, let me caveat this, you can learn to control your own responses more and more over time. Let's put it that way. I think that's a fair way to say, because I don't know if anyone's completely 100% in control of their responses, maybe some people out there. But the idea being that if you recognize this is happening, then you then have a moment to put a little space in between your immediate response to a situation by being able to think, okay, what's happening here? Or you just give yourself a moment to rethink how you want to respond to that situation. Because again, it's so easy to say, that punk's lying to me again, or something like that. You can go through all kinds of thoughts in your head that really just pull you down into your fight, flight, or freeze mode. And then you, as a parent, are not able to make a good, reasoned out assessment of the situation or come up with a good way to respond or react to this particular situation. In fact, I want to get you out of reaction, right? I want you to get into response, responding to a situation rather than reacting. And some of the subtleties of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode are it's super contagious. And that's by
It
design,
is.
evolutionarily, like if we're a tribe of people walking across the savannah and all of a sudden there's a cheetah that's stalking us, you know what I mean? If there's a threat to one of us, there's probably a threat to all of us. And so I think if you want to look at it from an evolutionary point of view, it makes sense that if one of us gets in our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, that it's going to trigger the whole group, right? Because that's a
Mhm.
survival mechanism. Like a school of fish, if one fish gets triggered, it'll spook the whole school. And that's the way to keep the group safe, right? So being very aware of if your son or daughter is in their fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, that's going to be contagious. You've got to be really careful that that's not going to trigger you. And again, that little lie can be the thing that's her fawning mode, and that's going to trigger the parent into their fight or attack mode, or whatever the mode may trigger the parent into. But that's an important way, maybe a more practical way that this might apply. You've probably experienced that as parents out there, and certainly that if your son or daughter is in the middle of a meltdown, how distressing that is to you as a parent, that sometimes you may get super angry and want to shut them down somehow or whatever, or stop them from doing this. Or you may just want to leave them and take the flight mode out of there and just get as much distance as possible. It may leave them in a dangerous situation or not in a good spot either. Or you may just freeze and not know what to do and not take action at all.
Well,
Or,
and I have a
commonly may go in there and try to fight fire, right? You go in there like doing the fawning mode. You're in like a firefighter trying to put out the fire by telling them
right.
anything you can tell them to get them to calm down, which may not be the best approach either. So anyways,
Buy a pony if you just stop crying.
whatever we need to do, right?
I have found that fight almost always is like gasoline. Almost always, because usually when I get into fight, it's because they've come at me fighting.
Right.
And for as much as I've learned from you, and I am proud of myself most of the time, but I'm just going to tell you a story about my daughter was home from college recently, and she was really tired, right? It was after exams and whatever, and she was used to sleeping in the dorm, which I would assume is really noisy, but for whatever reason there was noise here and it was bothering her. And I was asleep, my husband was asleep, I thought she was asleep, I think my son was downstairs playing video games, and that was the noise that was bothering her. So she comes charging into our room at 100 miles an hour, screaming that she can't sleep and that he needs to stop playing video games. Well, what do you think I did? Yep, I was woken up in the middle of my sleep, and I just responded in kind. It was not a good, and it was after all this time, you would think I would have learned. The one thing I will say that was good about it was she eventually got back to sleep. So did I. And then in the morning, I was able to look at it and say to her, look, I know that really what you needed was to have somebody hear you last night and understand what you were going through. And I didn't do that. And I'm sorry. And it built trust in our relationship. And at the same time, she said, well, I know that I didn't make it the easiest on you when I came charging into your room. So the good news is, even when you screw this up, if you have the understanding and you can look at it later and process it together, it builds trust in your relationship, which is always important. But as they're hitting that teen, young adult area where they're really starting to become independent and pull away from you, that's really where you need to make sure there's trust there, or you never see them again. So that's just my story.
Right, back to the playing the long game, right? You want to try to preserve the relationship, even if you're going through some rough times. You want to try to preserve the relationship so that you do get invited to the wedding and you do get to see the grandkids and all that fun stuff, right? That's why I think this is so important, and why I want to keep talking about this over time is, if you as a parent can recognize what's happening, then you've got a chance to respond differently. And it's hard to put that onto your adolescent or young adult if they just don't have the maturity yet to manage their emotions. I mean, that's part of adolescence, that's part of young adulthood, is getting better about that over time. But if you add the neurodivergence to that, it's a longer road. So it's going to most likely take them much longer to learn these emotional regulation skills, and also just the self-awareness of when they're starting to slip into the downstairs brain. But as a parent, it's a great opportunity to model this and to talk about it, right? So even if you do both get pulled into it after time has passed and you're both back into your upstairs brains, or at least mostly up the staircase there, that you can talk about it and say, wow, we really both got triggered here. Like, what happened? And let's talk about that. We got to be careful, because when one of us goes over the edge, we're going to pull each other over. So I'm going to try to do better and not get caught up in that. But again, I think as a parent, if you're seeing that happen, you can give yourself just that split 1 or 2 seconds of, wait a minute, I need to rethink this, and not go charging in, or not return fire, so to speak. If you're getting fired on, don't return fire, but find some strategies to rethink things, and give yourself a chance to think. Don't get in that automatic nervous system response where you're going to go into some sort of self-protection. And again, that idea of when we're in that mode, we become very tunnel vision, very self-interested, because really our body, even if it's not objectively the situation where you're under a physical threat, although sometimes you are with a son or daughter who may be really dysregulated, for the most part, your body believes it's in that mode and needs to protect itself. So you become self-interested and selfish. And again, I say that, I know it sounds like a bad word, but I mean self-interested and selfish in the sense that your brain is trying to protect your body. And that's all it knows how to do at that moment. So if the adrenaline kicks in and it puts you in this tunnel vision mode for like in a crowd, if a crowd gets spooked, that people will get trampled. And it's not because everybody all of a sudden wants to not care about their neighbor. They just become so panicked and self-focused that they can't see anything else, that they're trying to get to safety and that's all they know. Like even a drowning person, lifeguards have to approach a drowning person very carefully with a very specific technique of swinging up behind them and grabbing them in a certain way. Because if they come right up to a drowning person who's in that very deep survival, downstairs brain survival mode, they're just trying to get air and oxygen, they will climb on their rescuer trying to get air and they'll drown them both. So that's what it's like when you're both in your downstairs brain. You got to realize that they're not thinking and they're not in a place where they can exercise their higher cognitive processes. And so if you can recognize that's happening and not let yourself slide into that mode as well, then you have some room to make other choices and try to do something different, or at least give them space to go through their process and deal with going through that cycle of into their downstairs brain and then back out again over time before you try to intervene or talk or do something.